Welcome to optimization. Optimization is a key part of making sure your TouchDesigner networks run smoothly and efficiently. We often talk about project performance by discussing our processing budget or the amount of time we have before our screen refreshes. This budget can be found in the bottom left-hand corner here where we set our frame rate, here set to 60. An important distinction is that up here in the top FPS, we see 60 as well, but here this number actually indicates the frames that have been rendered in a given second. So this is a real-time calculation, while this is just the number that we're setting for our frame rate or our performance budget. For a project that's running at 60 frames per second, we have a total of 16.667 milliseconds to use for a single frame. But what does that really mean, and how can we investigate that a little bit further? Well, when we middle mouse on an operator, let's look at the display stop here, we have a CPU cook time available to us. And that here for our displays is about 0.09 milliseconds. What we want to do is we want to make sure that our budget for all of our cook times stays under that 16 millisecond budget to make sure that our project here running at 60 frames per second plays back smoothly. So what we could do is we would basically need to go through all of our operators. The CPU cook time isn't cooking because nothing is happening in there. It's just an image. Great. Okay, this is point 1. We would essentially need to go through and tally up all of the cook times for all of our operators and then essentially add them up to see if they hit that 16 milliseconds, or at least make sure that they are way under budget. Rather than do that, we can check our entire project's performance using the performance monitor. We can find that under the dialogues menu and click on performance monitor. So when this first opens up, it will be blank, but we can go ahead and click analyze. This analyze button will then analyze our project's performance. This window, essentially what it does is it shows us 1 frame's worth of cooking. And once we scroll all the way to the top, what we can see is the start frame. So here it says start frame. And as we go down, what we'll see is all of these operators' cook times, or the cook times for specific elements, and we'll see them in the order that they cook, which is incredibly helpful. The green bars that we see, here we see for rendering a window, this is actually the representation of the CPU cook time of an operator. So the larger the green bar, the greater the CPU cook time. Here it's about 1.19 or about 2 milliseconds. Then at the bottom of this window, we can actually see a summary and additional details of our frame time. We have our total CPU processing time, which is about 1.5 milliseconds. We have any unaccounted frame time and our total frame time. We also have details about the ops that we have in our network. Let's say we wanted to simulate what low performance looked like, or a way to basically assess what would happen if we had a lot more operators in our network and we wanted to be able to budget our processing time. Well, what we could do is we could add a hog chop. I'm going to double click on the network, make sure I navigate to chops and select hog. So the hog chop eats up CPU cycles. Right now, nothing's happening. We're not seeing any degradation of our performance. Great. But what we're going to do is we're going to change the delay parameter to 0.05. Immediately, what we should see is that our project has slowed down. Now our frame rate says 19 frames per second. We're not even hitting 24, so we have definitely seen a performance hit. If we wanted to check that in the performance monitor, what we could do is hit analyze. And then we would need to scroll up to see where the hog chop was. And here we can see the hog chop is taking a ton of our CPU cook time. It's taking about 50 milliseconds, and now our project total cook time is 52 milliseconds. So we are way over our 16 millisecond budget, which means we have dropped our frame rate for our project from 60 all the way down to 19. Let's go ahead and bypass that, and now we can see our frame rate jump back up. Let's look at one more way we can look at performance for our project globally. I'm going to go ahead and close the performance monitor, double click on the network, and I'm going to add a perform chop. This outputs channels that allow many channels, like frames per second that describe the current state of a TouchDesigner process and the overall TouchDesigner network. I'm going to go ahead and toggle on some of these: frame time, cook, and dropped frames. Here we can see our 16 millisecond budget. We also have cook and drop frames, but in order to see those, we need to add a trail chop, which will allow us to see a history of these channels over time. And now we can see if at any point we did drop frames, we would see them here. If I unbypass our hog chop, we can see we have a ton of drop frames. We also see that we have these drops in our cook, and we see our milliseconds that we had previously seen inside of the performance monitor. I'm going to go ahead and bypass that one more time. The last thing I wanted to show you is the Optimize Wiki page. The Optimize Wiki page is a great place to look for more on TouchDesigner performance optimization, some tools for optimization, and additional quick tips for optimizing CPU usage and GPU usage.